Hello and greetings from the underworld. And no, I don't mean Australia. I mean the actual underworld. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard of hell. I don't know. Not that there is a wizard in hell, although there's probably lots of wizards in hell. And isn't hell the name of a goddess? Or is it the name of the throne? Chris, answer that question. I know I asked a question in there somewhere.
I think you just made a mixture of statements, to be honest. Though I'm not entirely sure.
That's my version of a question. That is my version.
I'm not even sure they connected to one another. I think you just made a bunch of statements. So
now, tell me this: on the highway to hell, is there a little chef? Because I've been in the little chef, and for those people that might be listening in America and various other places, a little chef is a restaurant on the edge of like the motorway, and that it doesn't mean that. Well, we won't go into that.
No, it doesn't mean a little chef. No.
Yeah, you don't see many of them.
I didn't think they existed anymore. I thought
no, there are. Speaking of paranormal investigation, I went on my way to a paranormal investigation up north, and not North Midlands north, I mean proper north. You know, like Game of Thrones style north, where it's like really cold and stuff. And there was a little chef, and me and certain someone who shall not be named had to stop him for food on the way, and we stopped in an actual little chef. It was so strange because I thought that they didn't exist either. Anyway, you keep bringing us onto subjects that have nothing to do with the underworld, don't you?
Yeah, so totally my fault.
Today we are talking about the underworld because this is Styx, the under. Do you see what we did there? Styx as in the river Styx. Yeah?
I don't think...
It's not just thrown together, is it? It's not just thrown
together. Hours and hours of work. Hours and hours and hours and hours of work.
Script writing.
Yeah, River Styx. Let's start with that then. That's just one of several rivers in the Greco-Roman underworld.
Now, the Greco-Roman underworld, is that near other underworld? And if one chooses to go to the underworld, can you go compare or something like that and check out what star rating or what fire rating it's got? Like you've got hotness with chilies and stuff, little flames and that when you go to Nando's, peri chickens and that.
Yeah.
Do you have a flame rating for various different hells?
Yeah.
Because there aren't that many of them that are hells, and some that are hot, are they? And some of them are ice cold.
Yeah. So, depends what you keep in there, really. You know, your fridge has to be a certain temperature depending on what you're putting in it. It only works the same. It only works the same with the hell dimension. You got to think about what you store in there. So
we should probably actually say what hell or what the underworld is. I don't necessarily mean hell, because of course a lot of people would think of hell as a person, like the goddess Hell. Very often when people say hell, more often than not nowadays, I think, what's she been up to?
Yeah. Good old Ragnarok.
So yeah, what if you tell everyone about what the underworld is, and then after that you can tell us whether the underworld and hell is exothermic or endothermic.
I don't know if you'd agree with me though. And so we'll have to find out, won't we? So,
well, if you're wrong, how's about I tell you?
So, well, I can only speak to the ones that I built. As opposed to the ones that you may have been to. So, I think generally speaking, when people are talking about the underworld, they tend to mean the other side. At which point you're just talking about parts of astral realms or ghostly planes. If you're talking
Yeah,
about
but that's a
hell,
spoil sport.
if you're talking
That's
about...
a spoil sport.
Why is that a spoil sport?
Because that's the truth of the matter.
Oh.
That's the truth of the matter. I thought that this was going to be long drawn out gnosis.
So,
Isn't that what you're supposed to do on like podcasts and write books and stuff like that? Is that you tell them the point at the end, but you have to drag it out with a big story and stuff like that. You've basically just said, well, the underworld's basically where the spirits of the dead go after they die, and it's part of the astral world. You can visit it, have a little look on TripAdvisor if you don't quite know where the directions are. You know? Google Maps
but
it.
we're normally to the point. We don't
I suppose we
do
are.
all this filler and like. So that
So,
is
would
what
you
we are
say?
referring to the underworld. What I'm saying is that is very different to hell.
But what's hell?
So hells plural tend to be places you can stuff people for all sorts of reasons.
So, when did hell start being equated with the underworld? Is that because of our good Christian
I would
friends?
imagine it's mostly because of our good Christian friends. Whereas,
Because they're the only one that really has the really big bad hell, don't
yeah,
they? Nowhere else has that. Even their cousins, the Jewish people, and that they don't really
they
have.
don't really big on hell, are they?
No,
So, but they aren't they bigger on purgatory?
that's Catholics. Catholics like the purgatory thing, don't they?
So, but isn't there a...
But then, didn't Milton say that we're in purgatory at the moment? This is purgatory.
Yes.
Hence why it's both bad and good at the same time. It's kind of in the balance between heaven and hell, purgatory. Of course, if you believe in supernatural and all those Winchester brothers stories, then purgatory is like this actual thing where they literally just put stuff which there's nowhere else that will hold it, so they just shove it there. It's like the plug hole, basically. Stick it down the plug hole. Pour it down the plug hole.
Someone else will deal with it.
Yeah, make sure you're putting some baking powder and white vinegar down there frequently so it doesn't all get clogged.
Yeah, so I don't know. So hell, other than she of the Norse pantheon, in which we're referring to end of the world Ragnarok kind of the other direction being Catholic hell, I suppose is everybody's favourite one, because that's clearly where we're all going anyway, if that was true, because
Yeah, but only if you're Catholic.
so, but
I
equally,
mean, it's contract, isn't it? So okay, here's an interesting question. I want to know what you think about this, right? You know christenings, yeah?
yeah,
And you know all of the kind of Christian ceremonies where you promise the soul of your child before it's old enough to make a decision for itself, and you consecrate it to Yahweh, yeah?
yeah.
Would that constitute as a magical contract whereby which that child is then subject to the whims of that invoked deity? So, for example, if you had an unbaptized child from an atheist family, and you had a baptized child and a christened child from a Catholic family, or a Protestant family, or whatever, Christian, and then the child died at the age of 6 years old, 6 months and 6 days, say, would that child then go to hell from a contractual basis, and the atheist child not? How does one go to hell, Chris? Is it a contract? Can they literally just pull you away and take you there, or is it actually all these people that are scared of going to hell, that's why they convert to Christianity and stuff, actually have just signed the terms and conditions and not really understood?
It it really depends. One, you have to kind of break down the process of a baptism as opposed to a christening and what the difference is. big.
Well, christening is a promising, basically, and
Yeah,
basically a lot of the times we're promising.
it's a
Baptism is
cleanse of sin.
yeah, well, baptism is your second life, isn't it? So you're basically opening your heart to Jesus and accepting yourself as a Christian and being born again. Yes,
Yeah,
I've witnessed many baptisms. I've done baptisms. I've baptized people. I just haven't done any Christian ones. I did them with Apollo. But that's
yeah.
besides the point because it's still a solar deity. So, still
Same
worked.
different day.
Um, yeah, exactly. So there we go. So in terms of hell, so we've got a nasty hell. Okay, not the underworld where most people, if not everyone's going, but a nasty hell. How would you get there? Or how do people end up there, or things end up there?
Well, those are different. Are we going for a visitor pass, or are we going because you've made a contract and therefore that's your end place,
Well, I think that in
destination?
terms of if you're visiting, then that's really leisure and tourism, isn't it? So that's probably for a different podcast. We'll do that on the astral world and all that kind of jazz.
Okay. So we're only talking
This is
about how you
basically,
get yourself
this is basically,
forced there.
yeah, yeah. How do you get yourself forced there?
Or the easiest way is
If you could break it
is
down so that
contract.
our listeners can do it to someone they don't like.
The easiest way is contract.
Yeah.
So that is essentially writing a ticket for it. But
So are you saying that everyone that's got a pay monthly mobile contract's going to hell?
no, I'm talking about a specific
Of the,
kind of
but how do you
contract.
know? How do you know it? Have they read the terms and conditions?
Well, I'd hope you had.
Go and read those terms and conditions, kids.
Yeah.
You don't know what you've been signing your life away for. Every time I ignore and just click the yeah, whatever, do what you like to my cookies, that little pop-up that comes up on the internet on every website. Does it say in the small print, oh, and by the way, you're going to hell if you click this?
I think it should. It probably does on one of
Yeah,
ours.
it does on our Thoth Witchcraft website, I've made sure of it.
Good. But yeah, it's a specific kind of contract. Those are always tied to souls. And people think that there's always that argument about whether or not you can actually barter one's soul in the Christian world as to whether or not it actually belongs to you in the first place. And hence what all the baptisms and the confirmations and are all about, and Holy Communion.
Well, the Holy Communion is just vampirism, and
Well,
it's just lightweight vampirism. They're just feeding upon flesh and drinking blood
yes.
of a god. It's fine.
So yeah. So obviously that's all part of the song and dance that is that arrangement. Anyway, but yeah, the easiest way would be to put any kind of contract there. The hope with other traditions is always about which particular kind of, for lack of a better word, heaven you would be going to. And those places all existed within what you would commonly call underworlds, plural. Like, with the Greco-Roman world, you've got the Elysian fields, etc., compared to places within Hades. And then obviously you've got like the best of prisons, those supermaxes known as Tartarus.
Mm-hmm.
But those I tend to think more of as prisons. Would that be a better way to describe what those are?
I think that just comes from a lot of the Christian way of thinking, which even so is flawed, because you think of a prison, you think of when you think of Enoch, for example, you've got the Watchers, the angels were imprisoned in a mountain in heaven.
Yeah.
So prison doesn't have to be in hell or purgatory or anywhere like
No.
that. Heaven, technically, even in Christianity, there is a prison in heaven or prisons in heaven. But okay, so
But then I'd
about...
consider to go to heaven a prison, wouldn't you?
Depends how long you're there. I mean, a 5-star cruise around the Mediterranean's a prison if you're on it for months and months and months and months and months. Isn't it? I mean, I could probably manage 30 days with stopping off somewhere every day, but eventually it becomes tedious.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to say, is essentially,
That's the human condition, though, isn't it?
like, really, like, why would you want to spend the rest of eternity somewhere specific? That's like having a really bad timeshare in Minehead, isn't it, really?
What when these people that get them into that? Well, no, because Minehead and stuff like that, and timeshares and like those caravans, those prefabricated caravans that aren't really caravans because they're on stilts, and you pay like 20 grand for one, and you're only allowed to visit it during the summer season. And then every 5 years you have to replace your caravan with a better model because that's the terms and conditions you signed up for.
Yeah.
So I know people that have been stuck with that kind of thing. So yeah, so basically hell and the underworld are two different things.
Yep.
The underworld is a generic term for the place in which souls go after they die.
Yeah.
Whether it be human or otherwise.
Yeah.
Now, what awaits you after the underworld? So does everyone just go there and stay there forever and ever and ever? Because even if you stayed there for an eternity, because there are greater and lesser eternities, does that necessarily mean that reincarnation isn't a thing?
No.
Because obviously if you're going there, what people think of in terms of like a very simple linear time, they think of, oh, I die, then I go here, and then that's it. Whereas actually you could die, go there, spend an eternity there, and then move on,
Yeah.
technically.
Yeah. All of the above answers are correct. It's one of those. I always, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do cycles because you get all uppity about it.
We've already talked about reincarnation, but
yeah,
I think you put your cycles on the Patreon, didn't you?
Oh yeah, probably. But yeah, so it's yeah. For me, it's a case of it's what I would consider a waiting room, where you gather your thoughts before you make the next move.
I think nursing homes is waiting rooms.
Yeah, God's waiting rooms. I'm talking about the ones beyond that. Yeah. So to me, it's downtime before the next adventure. Although, to be honest, I can't remember the last one.
Okay, so when's the last time you went to the underworld or an underworld or part of the underworld?
As a visitor?
Yeah.
As a visitor, probably a couple of years ago.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that's very personal.
Yeah, but was there a point to your visit, or did you just like wake up there? You thought, oh, I'll subconsciously just go there.
Sometimes it's a good place to remember where you left things.
Right, because I'm just thinking in terms of obviously people listening, they might want to be thinking about, well, why would I want to go to the underworld? Because stereotypically people tend to go there, I think, who haven't gone there before anyway, go there to see if it exists. Because they want to know, well, where am I going to be ending up going when I die? So, oh, maybe if I go and have a little look now, I can check. It's like when you move into an area that you're planning on moving in and living in for a little while, just to see.
Drive round it occasionally.
You find out everyone's trashy, so you think, I'm not really going to live there. I think I'll live on the nicer area a bit.
Yeah. No, for me, it's part of a regular kind of working of leaving some. So let's call it a cleanse of some kinds. Sometimes a good cleanse is a bit of hellfire.
So what, you're dragging the souls of people that you don't like to the underworld and then leaving them there and then just sauntering back home again? Because that's what I imagine when you say such things.
Not during this.
It's like,
not during this lifetime.
Like when you see someone take the black bags, the bin bags out at night time, it's just you with just all these rolled up carpets just dragging them along. Is that why you've got that big thing of coins for the ferryman? Because you have to pay for not just yourself to go there, but also all of the bodies that you're carting over there as well.
You've also got to make sure you've got money to come back. A coin only pays for
Well,
one trip.
that's simple. You just stick. You just tie. You basically, for anyone that doesn't know, right? Get a drill, get your coin, drill a little hole in, get some of that really, really thin fishing wire, tie a little knot in it, and you just give the coin and then pull it back. It also works with some fruit machines as well, but you only need the one coin there. I mean, to be honest with you, it's no different than those little fake coins you put in shopping trolleys instead of putting a pound in, isn't it? Little key rings. There you go. Just keep that in your pocket. Or you can get some nice winged sandals as well. They also work a lot better because you can go to various other places with them. But that's the upfront investment, of course.
Yeah, and you've got to make sure you can actually get them for starters.
Converse do some really nice ones.
Oh, okay, Percy Jackson. So anyway, okay, when was the last time you went? For me, like I said, for me, going is just a kind of cleanse. It's a getting rid of certain feelings that build up and letting go of some of that energy. The last time now I was there for a good stay, then maybe your carpet rolls were more of an accurate description. But I'm not talking about that. We're talking about visiting. So why would you visit?
Well, I can't say I visited the Underworld in this current lifetime at all.
No?
It's never really no, I can't I mean, there may be a time, but I can't think of a time on the top of my head that I've ever done it. I've been to hells before. I've been to a hell, but that was for work.
Yeah.
That was a synthetically created hell, and that was not a very nice thing. So, but then we'd probably have to do an entire podcast on that because that's a story in itself.
For everybody at home, it wasn't one I made. Just for the record.
No, it wasn't one you made. It wasn't one you made, and I found it rather disgusting what I saw there anyway. I had to do something about it.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's a different category altogether. And yes, like you say, save that story for another time. But synthetic health then, let's kind of talk a little bit about kind of the distinction between the two.
Well, I just see the Underworld as a place name.
For the other.
So, yeah, essentially, I just see it as, well, that's the common name that we all tend to use nowadays, at least English speaking.
Yeah.
People would tend to use Underworld. Hell, I tend to see either associated with the throne, because I've always seen Hell, the goddess, as that's not her name.
No.
She sits on the throne, and the throne's called Hell, and her name's a mystery. But I think that's just neo-pagans being neo-pagans, because they love their mysterious names, which you need to be initiated to the 90th degree.
Yeah, of course.
Some name or whatever. It's kind of like, ugh.
Well, how else would you know? If you've not been and initiated to that level, how would you know?
Well, I know because I just phone up me goddess Hell and say, yeah, what's up?
What's up?
What's going on?
What's up?
And then I hear some nattering in the background, and I'm like, what's that? And she's like, oh, it's just the neo-pagans. I'm like, oh, you let them call you that? It's like, well,
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, hell is in terms of like Christian hell and stuff like that, probably the most popular thing. But they would see it from a monotheistic perspective as hell is a bad place where all of the nasty things and bad things are basically locked up. Whether you believe that people go there because they don't believe or follow Jesus, or whether you think that people go there if they're bad or what, doesn't really matter. Either way, all your rotten eggs basically go to hell from that perspective, until the end of the world, and then But that's very, very small. That's very small-minded, because obviously that's just taken into account one religion, although be it lots of different interpretations of that religion, but you're basically just really thinking about Christianity at that point. Whereas hell, in terms of it being a place of torture that someone's soul marinates in essentially is probably the what I would think of it as, because that's what I tend to come into contact with. So in which case, if you're talking about hells from that perspective, you're talking about, is it hell? Is it one that just has one soul in it? Is it got multiple souls in it? Who or what created it? So that just gets more and more complicated, I think, really.
Yeah, and I never sign my work.
So what hells have you been to then? Talk about any of those? Have you had much to do with that? Either making or visiting, or being dragged there, maybe.
Not in this lifetime. There are other times that would make a lot more sense. But that again, that would be a whole greater episode on its own. And what I was thinking more about was kind of visiting those other spaces. So obviously not just what would you learn from going to other spaces like that, and by that I mean kind of these spaces within. So what people call Valhalla or the Elysian Fields, or the highest branch on the Strizzle, what are the points of visiting these spaces? Because would you consider some of those just to be, again, seats of power for certain entities, or would you prefer to access that energy in a different way?
I think it's an interesting question. I think that when you talk about places to visit, you're talking about some kind of structured environment.
Yeah.
That would house things. So, the difference between being a box is the fact that you might put something in the box, but the difference with being a room is that it can house consciousness and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, if you're talking about places to visit that are on the astral world or outside of that, basically beyond the physical world, you are talking about architecture, I think. So places that have or must have been built by something.
Yeah.
Whether it's gods or what else. But they're things that have been built, so they're actually structured. Where I think that it may get a little bit complicated is sometimes people think of energy currents. So they think of, energy specifically, whereas I wouldn't think of a river necessarily as being a room or a place that you go.
Okay.
So when it comes to things like the Underworld, it would be structured enough for you to be able to visit it. Okay, it may appear slightly differently depending on where you go there and based on, your interpretation and the symbology and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, it's structure. When you're dealing with that level, higher levels of architecture and the design of things like that, then it can get quite complicated. And I've completely forgot what the question is anyway.
What I was trying to get at was that there is a very different methodology to creating sacred space in order to bring something here and going there to experience that.
Okay.
So that was what I was itching at you to expand on, because I know you're a big one on visiting spaces and architecture there.
Right, so opening a gateway and letting hell or the underworld, which is kind of, I wouldn't say that I haven't done that before. I'm talking in terms of have I gone to the underworld. Obviously opening up gateways and stuff like that and having that flood in, almost like opening up a freezer door and having the cold air and stuff and the smells come through, but you're not actually stepping into the freezer. That kind of thing. But in terms of that, it's really a case of the reason for doing it. The reason I haven't been to the underworld is because I haven't really needed or felt the need to go there for any reason. Whereas to opening it up to manipulate and mess around with it, I could put a hand in and do that. But I don't really know. I think we're actually coming out of time anyway.